Welcome, everyone, to the People Solve Problems podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Flinchball, and today we have a special guest, Brittany Irwin. Brittany, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
So, really glad to have you on here. A little introduction. You are an applications and AI engineering manager at NFI Industries with an industrial engineering background from University of Pittsburgh Swanson School of Engineering. Always glad to have engineers on here. Background in logistics operations, process improvement, and AI-enabled automation. Your career spans large-scale 3PL operations and fast-moving B2B SaaS startups, which gives you a practical lens on how people, process, and technology come together to solve real-world problems. So let me start with a pre-AI world. You kind of talk about B2B SaaS startups and other experiences. What in your background kind of and experience set you up to be an AI engineering manager?
That's a great question. I, in that SaaS tech world that I was kind of going from company to company, learning what they do and configuring solutions for different customers, it was very easy, one, to slide into that kind of world because of the industrial engineering knowledge that I have from before, or that experience of standardization and identifying what's wasteful and eliminating it from the process. And then going into these different, whether it was health tech or fintech or whatever it might have been, there's always waste, right? And they don't really understand that it's wasteful until you start to introduce technology or introduce a new process to them, and they have to like kind of face the music on what is actually helping them, what's hurting them, what they kind of have to eliminate from their process, and what kind of new habits they need to implement. So going and being kind of like in the configuration side of it too, or implementation side of it, where I'm listening to their requirements and helping them configure and kind of coming up with this new standard process. Every time you implement technology, there's going to be some sort of standardization because technology has to have a standard input to have that standard output that you're looking for. And I think it leads right into the whole world of AI, where AI does need a standard input in order to give you a standard output each time. So it really just all came together very well for me in that sense.
It's a great way to frame it. So let's move forward to maybe your aha moment. Everybody talks about when ChatGPT launched and their sort of the first night they lost sleep discovering what was maybe possible. What was maybe your moment where you kind of said, "This is a space for me. This is a space where I can make a difference. This is a space where I can do what I do best."
I, no joke, ended up standardizing myself out of a job, which is like my current team. Like, this is our goal. Like, we want to continue doing that wherever we go. It makes us valuable. It makes us uh, help earn value for the company and share that knowledge and make it repeatable, right? So I was doing an implementation manager job. I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. And with AI being my tool, I was sending out, all my emails incredibly fast, incredibly knowledgeable, personable. I had just everything at the go and using it as a tool, and to the point where I was able to document and have it ready so that anyone who came on would be able to easily replace me with those same tools. And I we parted ways because I at that point was like, this is no longer what I need to be doing here. I've done everything I can do. It's up to you guys to take it where you want to take it. And I'm going to move on and find new thing to standardize and implement these tools, the same tools I've done there at a new place, and keep growing in my knowledge and skills there with AI. And that's what I've been doing. That's been incredible.
That's great. So A lot of people, I think a lot of companies think they're behind, and they're actually not as far behind as they think because a lot of companies are, so to speak, behind. A lot of companies will, their strategy mostly at this point is a bunch of people just doing somewhat random stuff in Copilot or whatever they have access to. So let's just kind of talk about your job title before we switch into, sort of the bigger picture of how you create success. But how would you describe the difference between what people do on their own in Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, and what is AI engineering manager work?
That's also a great question. I would say that when you're utilizing AI for yourself and furthering yourself or making your job easier, right, on a day-to-day basis, that's great, and that's we should be all be doing that. But the difference between doing that and what I'm doing is making it scale across a different company or the whole company or enterprise or organization, whatever, wherever you're working, right? And so I want to use it and make it repeatable so that it's a tool that people who don't know how to use AI can still use it, or those who do know how to use AI can use it, whatever the audience may be, but making it accessible to them, making it easy to use, understandable, training them on it. That's the real difference there.
Yeah, that's great. So now let's get into the work itself. When we start talking about transforming how work is done using AI, what's your sort of pre-implementation checklist? What are the ingredients that have to be in place? And I'll kind of ask it in two ways, and you can decide whether to, parse it or not. But I think there's before you proceed with AI, and then there's also, do you proceed with AI, meaning this isn't even the right application. So how do you look at that sort of pre-assessment checklist before you jump in?
So I ask a bunch of questions about it. So it typically starts with the process itself. Where does that process start? Where does it end? What are the top exceptions? Why do they happen? And making sure that's all documented, because if it's not documented and accessible to you, that's kind of where you have to start. That cuts through all the noise of what you need to be doing, and that's the first step. Then it becomes more about the data and the definitions around the data. So, like in my world, like on time for one team could mean something completely different for another team, and it feels like common sense. Like, no, on time is on time, but is on time leaving the door or is on time arriving to the customer? And it could very well mean different things to different people. So we need to make sure the terminology aligns with each other. There's data definitions for everything, and if there's any gaps in data that is going to be analyzed or used to help problem solve, that's contextualized and documented, so that could be used later for AI to access and use. But then also there's the politics of it all, and I think that's a really important aspect of it too. If you ask the question, who benefits first if we standardize or automate with AI or just automate in general, there's your biggest champion. And that's who you need to go ask questions to. But then if you ask the question, who loses power if I automate or standardize or enable with AI, that kind of shows you who is going to be your biggest hurdle, because they're going to make it hard. Like, I've experienced different processes that I'm trying to automate or enable with AI. And if I ask the question, who loses power, those are oftentimes the people who are not giving me information when I ask, or dragging their feet, or making it a little difficult, or whatever it might be. It's good to know the kind of the landscape of what we're doing, who's going to be our friend, who's going to be our hurdle, and understanding that to kind of help engage, is this worth it? Because if they have a lot more, the hurdle has a lot more power than you might as well just go and tackle a different problem. So yeah, those are kind of the things I do, and you just need to make sure it's documented, well defined, that it's measured in like a consistent way with the data definitions and the data itself is consistent, and then understanding the power dynamics and making sure all of this is accessible to you so that you can make it accessible to AI.
Yeah. Great. I mean, it's hard to hear any talks about AI where they don't also talk about data. And I think, there's having the data, they're having it accessible. People talk about data lake or interoperability. But the definitions matter, right? On time. What does that mean, right? Just like everybody's definition of hot is different, right? So in an LLM world, right, we can use language, but language means different things to different people. So we hear about data a lot. We very infrequently hear about process and politics, which I think is very fascinating. But let's go back to process. Why aren't more people talking about standard work? Why do they seem willing to either turn over the how to the applications engineer or just to the black box of the AI tools?
I think it's funny because that comes back to politics a little bit, but out of fear. I think it's generally like the politics of fear about it all. And I think that personally, I don't think that there's a lot to fear if you are ready and willing to embrace AI and use it and start training it and just be a willing participant in all of it. I think that you're much safer than you would think because there needs to be a human in the loop still. There needs to still be human accountability. I can set up as many agents as I want, but I still need someone to be checking that agent's work because I can't make an agent accountable for the mistakes it's going to make. And it will inevitably make mistakes, and I see it do it all the time. So there still needs to be someone saying like, yes, I approve this decision it wants to make, or no, you need to go back and change this about what you want to do, or just saying no, like it's a denial or rejection of whatever AI is saying it wants to do. And in whatever process you're doing, right? There are decision points, and a human needs to be in the loop for that. So I think it's a huge fear factor of like, oh, it's going to replace me. It's going to replace all these heads. I think it's going to not necessarily replace a whole human in the process. I think a human in the process still needs to be there. However, I do think it's going to reduce the number of people needed for that process, if that makes sense. So, what might be five people doing the same task could just be two in the future.
Mhm. So I want to come back to accountability in a minute, but you mentioned earlier asking a bunch of questions, and I'm curious, do you have like a favorite question that really makes people like they can't answer right away? Their eyes kind of have to look up and they have to think and process because it's not a gotcha question, but it's a hard to answer reflection question. Do you have a favorite or a couple favorite questions that really get to the hard stuff?
It always depends on what I'm asking about. So it tends to shape around the exceptions and why they happen. And the why they happen and what to do if they do happen is what gets people's noggins moving, because that's usually not the documented or well documented part. Usually that's the very tribal part. And if it's tribal, AI is not going to be able to learn it. So you have to start documenting it. And to start documenting it, that's when people start looking up and they're like, oh, you're right. When that trailer comes and this happens, then yeah, we got to call this person or do this and whatever it might be. The why behind exceptions and what to do when they happen is usually the hardest part to answer.
Yeah, yeah, and especially if we don't have good documented processes, we're going to have variation, which means we're going to have exceptions. And there's exceptions that we've had before that we can predict will happen again. We just don't know when. And then there's the exceptions that come out of nowhere that have never happened. And it's hard to build a program around that, right? Even in an AI environment. I always like to say, when your gas gauge says E, we all know what to do. But if you put gas in your car and then the gas gauge doesn't change, that's a very different moment, right? And so it doesn't happen often, but then you have to think very hard and very differently about what happens next. So let's come back to human accountability. I think there's a lot of environments where like it's just safe to agree with the boss, right? Even if they're wrong, it's safe because it was their idea and you agreed, so you're probably not going to get fired for that, even if it was wrong. I think there's certainly a risk of, hey, AI spit out an answer and there is a human in the loop looking at it, but is it just safe to kind of go, well, yeah, I just agree with it and I move it along because that's the safe decision. What are the challenges you see in the implementation of human accountability and a human in the loop?
The biggest one is when people trust it more than themselves, like you're saying, like just agreeing with it, not really fully reading what it's asking you, and they'll just approve whatever they see and just kind of let it go. You, I think it's very important to understand that AI is, it's not even like an equal partnership. They are the co-pilot. You are the main pilot, they are the co-pilot. They have to answer to you. It needs to respect your decisions and your safety calls, your new like exception calls, or just execution judgment at that point, right? So it can suggest all it wants, and it will confidently suggest what it thinks should be done, right? It will confidently be wrong also, but it's really important to execute that judgment that we have already, you know, have years of experience in building that. So it's super important to just understand that, like, your first chair, it's second chair. It's doing a lot of the work and mental load for you now, but you're still the person who needs to answer to any decision it makes and still be monitoring it.
Yep. Oh, that's a great challenge. And there's a lot of cases where I'm personally I'll be in domains that I have no expertise or even basic knowledge. And so just like 10 years ago, I'd trust a Google search more than I trust myself because my knowledge was zero. That can happen here too. But when it's in the workflow, you can't have humans that don't have that enough knowledge to provide that judgment, that discernment, and that accountability and ownership. Um, so let me come back to politics just for a little bit. I really like the framing of who's going to gain power and who's going to lose power. Um, as you consider how do you engage, especially those that might lose power? I was once, although this happens at a lot of companies, but there was one client I had many years ago where essentially having up-to-date information was success. So if somebody was presenting on PowerPoint at the front of the room and you could look it up and update them and say, that's not right, this is right, you just got a tick mark in front of everybody. That's a win. It wasn't healthy. It was just that was a win. So a lot of environments where knowledge is power, how do you engage those that might lose some power in the process of some AI implementation?
I would say that like it's all in the framing. It really is. So they might perceive that they're losing power, or they might perceive that they're on the chopping block because AI is coming in to, help them or make them more productive. But if you frame it in a way of like, this is not going to, it's going to affect your job, but it's not going to negatively impact you as you might think it might. But it's really going to set you up so that you can handle 5 clients at a time rather than two, or whatever it is, like just kind of helping them be more productive, helping them with an extra layer of validation, decreasing any potential for errors, not kind of like don't set them up of like we're reducing your errors, like they're already doing errors. You want to frame it in a way that is empowering them and instilling confidence that they are still needed, still important, and it's all in that framing so that they still feel that they are a positive part of this process.
Excellent. So let me come back to the hard work of the process itself. Right? So do you find as you engage in a process and an implementation, are you most of the time looking to create automation end to end, or are you grabbing specific tasks within a process and saying there's a step, and there's a step, and then the rest is better off left the way we are currently doing it? So how do you look at that? Is it activities within a process, or is it more often an end-to-end process?
It's one bite out of the elephant at a time is what we keep saying to ourselves on our team. We will pick one thing that we want to automate, and we'll identify probably a couple other things within that same process that we're like, yeah, we could automate this part too. And then probably phase three would be this. And we have like a multi-phase plan, but because it's so new to our space and our industry, we're trying to emulate this crawl, walk, run mentality where crawl is we are just picking one specific part of the process and we're going to automate it and we're going to try to do it to the best of our ability. And then if that's successful, and we hope it will be, and um, we want not only for it to be successful, but we want a positive reaction around it as well. That's part of it, is like gaining that trust so that we can then scale it across different parts of the organization. And so then once that crawling is successful, we will go on to walking, and then we'll go to running, and then we'll have a process that's fully automated.
Mhm.
But it's a part of that gaining trust, and that politics is a much bigger part of AI implementation than you would believe. But that's a very important part of it, is gaining that trust, having that positive impact, that positive reaction. And so you can be as successful as you want, but if you have a negative reaction to it or a negative adoption to it, you can't force it at that point. You have to have a positive adoption and reaction to that.
Well, that's probably a great note to end on. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective, your experience. There's much to learn and much to do, and I'm so glad to have folks talking about some of the non-AI ingredients to make AI successful. It's a lot more than prompt engineering for sure. So I really appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so great. Thank you.